There is no one size fits all or a simple fix when it comes to your well-being. Hi, my name's Josephine, founder of Positivity Center and Wellbeing Consultant, and a person figuring out how to be my best. So join me in conversation with friends, sharing what works for them, and then listen to what works for others so you can create something that will work for you. I am so looking forward to talking to you today. You want to know why?
I don't know. Do I? Do I want to know why?
Mostly because you're usually asking me the questions, and today I get to ask you the questions.
Yes, the roles have been switched.
Okay. Well, hello. It's Josephine on my show without a name yet. And I'm joined here with my friend and my coach, David, and he is the guinea pig to be the first on this show. And I'm so thankful to have him here. Hi, Dave.
Hello. Nice to see you.
I know.
Maybe that is the name of the show.
That's actually what I've been thinking. The show without a name?
Maybe.
Why not?
Who's to say what the name of the show needs to be?
Well, I was thinking there are many shows out there that just probably were birthed from that kind of a perspective, like The View. A bunch of women or people talking around a table expressing their views. I'm like, and they called it The View. They could have called it something else.
Totally.
So
the beauty of names is they just show up. It's pretty serendipitous. So it might actually be Show Without a Name, or there might be a name that comes from it.
But to anybody thinking about having a show and letting a name stop you from having a show, just have the show.
Yeah.
I think the conversations around the show are more important than what you call it.
Totally.
Yeah. So here's to anybody who's been thinking about having a show.
Yeah. Just press record.
Awesome. So glad. So interestingly enough, thinking about what brought this moment to be was that I was given a gift. I was given a gift of hydrangea flowers from my husband. And I've told you that story, David, and you know how meaningful they were. But they became meaningful on so many different layers for me. And it became a catalyst, really, because I've been visiting too many dark places for a little bit too long. They were becoming more so my home and not just places I was visiting. And so anyways, with these hydrangea flowers, I put them in water, and within 2 days, they started to just wilt away. And I was like, oh, the first thought I had was these hydrangeas, they never last. And then somehow I was able to harness that thought, stop that thought, and change that thought. And I went, okay, well, maybe I can actually snip these flowers stems and put them in some fresh water and see what happens. And I haven't told you this, but those flowers lasted like plus 3 weeks plus. And I'm just...
Do you still have them?
No, I wish I did. Oh. I know. I was thinking of no, I think it was last weekend that they finally bit the dust. But I'm going to have to do something like have some hydrangea flowers around like every week, because I'll be recording a show every week. I'm not sure.
Maybe. Yeah. They might be the inadvertent mascot for the show.
So I mean, anyways, that was my catalyst. It was something that happened that kind of allowed me to catch my thoughts as they were happening, to make change. And it birthed this idea of a show that I thought would be so cool to really just talk to people about, well, what are we doing on a daily or a weekly or a yearly basis to make sure that we're cutting our stems and placing them in fresh water? And I mean, I use that as an analogy, but basically, what are you doing to nourish yourself in your life? And maybe that might be a good place to start.
Yeah. So you're asking me?
Yeah.
There are many things that I do to nourish myself. And sometimes it's a struggle to pick which one, and as a result, not pick any, and so not nourish myself. So there can be just as much of a crux as having too many available as there are as like not having any or never ever considering it before. So yeah, one of the main things that I do when I really need to recharge is I go and immerse myself in a fictional world, typically inside of a video game, maybe inside of a movie, but I like to be active and engaged inside of the world. And it is one of the best ways for me to really forget about everything that's going on and just be inside of this new adventure and the awe-inspiring nature of the environment that some of these developers create. Like, it's just truly magnificent worlds that you would never. They just don't exist, right? And so because they don't exist, anything's possible, and so they just go outrageous, right? So that's one of the main ones for me, is I will immerse myself in a virtual world. There was a moment before I got bored of the world where I would play with my kids in those worlds.
Can we pause and talk about that world for a bit?
Yeah, sure.
I actually love that you're using something that often comes up as not a really good strategy for mental health, if you will, because sometimes people use virtual worlds or movies to just like completely forget, like numb themselves, kind of like how some people use alcohol. But I get a sense from you that it's deeper than that. And I really would like it if you could share a little bit more about the layers that you're immersing yourself in, because it truly is an immersive experience for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm very busy during the week, right? Like, there are a lot of things that I'm up to. There are a lot of objectives that I'm striving towards, and it can really be tiring and mentally draining, because there's a lot of weight and expectation to achieve those objectives, right, in the real world. Whereas in the virtual world, and now granted, like, some of the storylines, I mean, they can be pretty weighty as well, right? The whole world is on your shoulders, as it were. But because it's a game, I know I'll be okay, right? Like, I have many attempts at, I know I can count on having many attempts at giving it a shot, right? So the intention going into the game, and it's so different than what it would be like in real life.
Or are there some similarities? Is it like you're kind of saying you're practicing attempting and failing, attempting and failing?
Yes, the
Right?
weightiness of it in the real world, though, is heavier than in game.
Is there practice? Because when you and I talk, we know each other fairly well, and you've helped me with so many things. And I see that in you, that if a certain way how doesn't work out, that there's another way how that will become available or be created. So I wonder if there's a little bit of practice that you're getting in your virtual world that you may not even realize is such a subconscious immersive experience that's showing up in your heavier real world.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely going to pay more attention to it. For the most part, I haven't really made that connection, because it consistently in the real world, the significance of achievement, it energetically is very different than in the game world. And I haven't quite crested that, not riding the highs too high or the lows too low in the real world like I would in the game, right? Like, the high was great, but there's more to be done. And so just keep going. You can't rest in this moment, because there's this other thing that you really have to take care of. Whereas in the real world, I'll take a break, and sometimes I'll end up checking out inadvertently, and then I got to rebuild momentum again. It's an interesting parallel between the two worlds, because every time even though I take a break from the game, when I come back to it, I'm right back where I left off, and I just continue with that momentum. But it's not the same in the real world for some reason. Yeah.
I think there's so much power in looking at it as a parallel world.
Totally.
It's just so intriguing.
Yeah, there's a freedom to it. And in fact, there was I can't remember her name now. She did a TED talk on the power of gaming, and the value of gaming in solving complex problems in the world, in the real world, right? The the freedom that the virtual world gives, much like I spoke to, allows for exploring and being curious where you would not normally. And so you have the freedom to fail because you know you're going to have another shot. It's an interesting psychological tango that we play in the real world.
And you might want to leave it in the shot. What's that?
In the real world, we have it that I don't have another shot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you might want to leave these parallels very distinct and kind of in the subconscious, because I wouldn't want it to come into your, too close to your real world, that it doesn't become a strategy that you can use as a I need time, I need rest, I need refuge.
I think that's what you pointed to earlier, right? The balance. It can be, you can go all in too much on either side and it doesn't work. There has to be a balance struck.
So good. So balance. So are there other things that you do? Or does that seem to be your number one?
No, I do writing a lot. There's a lot of writing that helps me get out what's in my head and out of that repetitive ongoing thinking about it. When I write it, when I put it down on paper, it disappears. It still lives. It exists somewhere, but it's almost like the act of shedding it away, and allows me to just have space for something else. Most of the time, I'd say like 8 times out of 10.
I remember when I was studying, like my very first days of studying positive psychology, my diploma program, we were taught about the thought and emotional cycle that's happening inside of our brain, and that there's something that our body has to do to interrupt that. Otherwise, we just go, thought leads to an emotion, leads to thought, leads to an emotion, or emotion leads to thought, leads to a thought, leads to emotion. And we don't realize the power that we actually have to take action, especially with our body, which writing is, an action that you're doing with your body to interrupt that thought cycle. So it becomes possible for you when you do that. You're interrupting the thought cycle and it gets out. And what else?
Well, there's now, it'll either go one of two ways. Either I leave it, and that thought is to potentially return to at a later date, or never, or I find myself writing more in that moment to deepen it, to distinguish it, to define it, to get a measure of completion around it. If it's a struggle, or to really acknowledge the celebration if it's a win, like whatever it is that I'm writing, it'll go one of those two ways. High level, surface, out of the mind, ready for something else, right? Space in my mind for something else, or I will take the deeper dive.
Yeah, that was going to be my other question, is what do you tend to write about?
Oh man, anything that I have a curiosity or tend to like daydream about. And for me, it's usually about what's possible for the future, or like how we function as humans, and always making the connection to how I'm functioning as a human, or what I notice with those that are around me, whether it's my kids or my wife, or an interaction that I had with somebody else. Those are the things that I usually write about. I do attempt to, and I say attempt because there's a part of me, one of my characters, if anybody who has not heard of her before, Jill Taylor Bolt, I believe that's her name. She talks about these 4 characters that you have in your mind, and I've distinguished them. I've given them all names, and so I can tell when certain characters are kind of like took over the reins of control, right? The thought process and the thinking. And I have one character who is very fearful and doesn't want to try anything, like wants to play it safe. And then I have another one that is all about getting shit done and getting it right, like getting it perfect. And so when I'm writing, and of course there's 2 others, one is a creative, the creative side. And so the creative one and the get shit done character, they are constantly grappling, because to be creative, you need to be okay with just letting go of screwing something up, of not knowing how to do it, and be curious about it, right? To explore it. And when I attempt to do like story writing, so character building and things of that nature, they don't go very far because there's so much involved. And right away, the stories in my head is like, yeah, but you don't know how to do that, or you're not good at it, so you should just stop. And so I'll stop.
So what's the possibility that's there for you now that you've distinguished these four characters?
Oh, I am more attentive to who's in the driver's seat or trying to get into the driver's seat. And I can either let them or decide that I am in the driver's seat and you are supporting me, or that somebody else needs to be in the driver's seat, and we all get to support that that energetic that momentum moving forward.
So it
I
sounds like
notice
a
it.
bit of a, oh, sorry.
I just said I notice it more when
You notice it.
those
Yeah.
chirpings are going on.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's a relationship. You don't seem to be, angry or have distaste towards some of your characters that you'd rather not show up. And it reminds me of emotions and, messy emotions like anger and frustration and irritation showing up, and you just wanting to tell them to take a hike. It doesn't really necessarily work so well when you do that,
I
because then you're just
tried.
suppressing it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried for when I first become aware of one in particular. I tried to like get rid of him, that he wasn't welcome. I don't want him around. But that, of course, is impossible because he's there inside of my head. So it started the journey of accepting who they are and who they are not, and how they work together. And yeah, it's a love. It's not a triangle because there's five of us. I don't know what you would call it, but it's complicated. Let's just call it that.
It's the relationship with self, I would call that.
Yes. Yeah.
And loving oneself as oneself that's a really complex thing to do. So easy to say, complex to do.
Very.
Okay, so the going into the virtual world is really helpful. Writing out to interrupt sort of the thought process that sometimes leads to maybe not helpful emotions, or vice versa. And then this distinguishing of these four characters that are these four parts of you, and I guess kind of finding a way to relate to each one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but still remaining in charge. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah.
You probably had a long list. So I just want to make sure we get through your whole list.
I only had four things.
Oh, there's one more. Okay. So good.
It wasn't that long. So the next one is just following a system. Yeah. There was a time in my life where I thought that I could just do it how it needed to be done, naturally occurring, and that I could be consistent in that. And I cannot. We cannot, as human beings. We got too much going on. There's too many things, too many shiny objects, and so we need a little bit of structure. And it can't be, and again, it's a balance, right? I've gone from having it overly structured and now almost choking any sort of creativity or energy or enthusiasm, to being so free spirited and completely off the rails that I've been completely unable to channel any of it effectively. And so it lays in between. You need some system and some structure and a process to follow to elevate and expand over time, because it matures and it becomes more sophisticated over time. It needs more this and less that, or whatever the case may be. So I am actively looking at my systems and structures to see how well they are supporting me in the work that I'm doing, including downtime and recharge, and it's a moving target, right? My structure is never the same, even though it is the same. It's constantly shifting, but I'm honoring it within my structure.
I remember this one time we had a call and you were sharing a screen with me, and I had this one really quick glance at your calendar.
It was
And it was
palpable.
full.
Were you stressed when you saw it?
I was like jealous. Wanted to be as organized as you.
I
Wanted to
have,
have a David system.
yeah.
I'm
You know,
working
it's
on it.
funny. I on top of my calendar, I have, I think now about 20 other calendars of other people. My kids and my wife are part of it as well. And so I help them build and create structure as well to support them in what they do, depending on how committed they are in implementing a structure, because that's key. So
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say was your calendar isn't just you and what you do for work. Your calendar is all of your worlds combined. And like maybe you could share a little bit more about, what the advantages are to creating a system that incorporates, not only the four characters that live in your head, but all the different people and, things in your world.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have something that's basically at the bottom of my calendar. It's a framework of placeholders for certain intentions. Certain activities require a certain type of energy, right? And so creative blocks or learning blocks or personal blocks. I have my gaming blocks in there as well. They're there to hold that exercise from an energetic perspective. And then I get to check in at those moments. And you have to check in on your calendar, because if it's there and you don't look at it, it's all for naught. It doesn't matter. And then I look to see if I'm like energetically a match to to what it is that I said I wanted to do in that block. Not that what I should do, but what I wanted to do in that block. And it's either a yes or a no.
Okay. And so what if it's a no? Like, how do you decide if it's on your block and it was put there with intention especially for an energetic purpose? How do you decide whether it's a yes or a no?
Well, I just check in to see what feels right. This requires a focused energy. Like let's make it real. It's a project block, and typically client work fits inside of a project block for me. And I then look at what needs to be done and check in to see if I have the capacity, the ability to go as far or as deep in as required for that particular thing. And if not, then I look to see what else, like where am I at energetically? What can I do? Where would I be most effective? And I adjust my schedule accordingly. So it might still honor something in a client related capacity, but it'll be different. It'll just be different work. And I just spend time to define that. It's like, okay, I usually do my heavy lifting in the mornings. So my project blocks are usually in the mornings, and that's when I have the most energy. So it doesn't usually, I would say the times that it does happen is when I've been going for a while, a couple of weeks, like same thing, just kind of moving the markers forward and really getting tired as a result. There'll be moments where it's like, oh man, I do not have the energy to continue this project today. And so I'm not going to. And I just decide to do something else. I will read, or I will do something creative.
Will you do one of those things that you talked about that you do to nourish your life?
Yeah. That's when it's a really good indicator that something needs to be done.
Yeah.
Right. You're kind of on E.
Yeah. And then from all these things you've learned about yourself, and especially the ability to assess your energy and determine, to still get everything productive done, by X timeline, or to ask for extensions when needed. you're noting your energy, and then you know yourself well enough to know what to do. And also you know yourself well enough to assess where you're at. So tell me, like, it's one of the things I learned from you is, I remember our first coaching session where you asked me, who do I want to be known as in terms of, with other people, and who do I want to know myself to be?
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen over time in working with you is that those are interesting, I guess, distinctions, because some people know you to be a certain way, and sometimes you don't even necessarily see that in yourself, but it all starts from intention of who do you want to be. And so what is it for you? Like, who is it that you've decided to be that has grown to be able to be this person who then can assess his energy and also determine what he's going to do about it? Because it all comes from who you are.
It does, and it changes all the time. So for me, it's never just a single way of being, because we are dynamic and complicated, and so every quarter I will do the work like I do with my clients. I will set an intention for a state of being that is that would best serve the objectives that I'm looking to achieve in the next 3 months. And I strive to hold that to the best of my ability, or at the very least, I have that now documented as a point of reference for me to go back to, for me and my coach to go back to, and for me to honestly ask and then answer, am I being who I said I wanted to be?
And here's a good question that I think some people think they're supposed to be this certain way all the time. And what I'm hearing from you is like, no, it's dynamic, it's fluid, it changes over time. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that you decide who you're going to be. You don't necessarily go with, I think David is this way, so he's just going to always be this way. And
I used to do that, by the way. When I first started this process, I had it that this way of being was uncompromising. I could not compromise it, because then I'd be lying. Like it wouldn't be true. And I would make that mean so much in a negative capacity. It'd be disempowering. It's like, you did not measure up to who you said you wanted to be in the world. Oh man, that's heavy.
Well, and you get to decide. You don't always have to be who you think you're supposed to be, or who somebody else told you were supposed to be. And I love how you're basically, what I hear you doing is you're just pushing the boundaries on who you are. Like, why does there have to be a limit anyways at all?
Totally. Yeah. There's one thing that I've heard stated over and over again by many people who I admire and respect, and really want to mirror in a lot of ways. And they are never the same. They are always changing. And they've given themselves the freedom to be okay with that. Like that's actually the point of it all.
I would love for you. Yeah. Share with the listeners who some of those people are for you.
Well, my wife is a big one. So Maya Corona, and always inspired by the work that she has been doing, the choice that she made 4 years ago to pursue her own curiosities inside of making magic with color and on canvas, and just seeing her growth as a professional artist. It's always inspiring. So she's one of them. And I mean, I'd be remiss to say that my kids wouldn't be in that either, because so we practice unschooling, and that was a real exercise in me letting go of control. I like to control things. Can you tell? I've got like systems and structures and boxes, and right. And it can be good until it's not. And the homeschooling adventure with the family, and moving it through to this point now where they have autonomy to just pursue what it is that they have interest and curiosity around, and that they also honor system and structure. Yesterday, I had them recreate their schedule. Okay, so there was a schedule that that we kind of made together, and then I optimized a little bit for you, and there's some stuff that's not working about it. And so I want you guys to look at it and create a new schedule to follow. Just as something, an exercise, right? It's part of the doing, the practice of the doing that I really want them to get into. And so that's what they did. And it's day one, and I check in. I'm like, so, or how are you following your structure? Is it working? And of course, they're 10 years old, so they say yes. And I think it's working. And even if it's not working according to my expectation, it's working because they're not in front of their computer. They've gone and decided to do something else that's in their schedule. And so there was a level of empowerment there. So I'm always inspired by who they are in the world, and what they've been able to achieve, to just do it because I decided to do it. Like, right. Yeah, I can do that too, can I say to myself, right? And then there are those that have been critical mentors in my life. One of my best friends, Vern, he was a key person in my life along the journey of just finding self, him finding himself and me finding myself. And we started the podcast as an exercise of discovering self, right? To speak what's on your mind and share what it is that you have aspirations for, that you're struggling with, or whatever it was that exercise that allowed us to really start the process of understanding who I am, who he is. Adam Joyce is another one who I would say was the person that set me along my path, the path that really made a difference in my life, and that I dragged my wife along with. It's like, listen, this there's something about this, it's working, I'm excited, and so we're doing it together. And she's like, okay.
She came.
Very accommodating with it all, but he was a catalyst, without question. And there was a thing that he said that sticks with me all the time. He's like, whatever you do, just don't get off until the ride is over. You know, life being a metaphor as a roller coaster ride, right? And man, there are times where I feel like I'm hanging off the bar, not behind the bar, right? Like, so I got to stick on this ride, and it's stuck with me forever.
That's beautiful. And all the people you share are people that I know. What comes to my heart when you talk that way is your influence that you have. And if you can go right back to the beginning of our conversation, when, you get in your own head, in your own heart, and you convince yourself that what happens in the virtual reality world can't happen in your other reality world, you don't have to look very far when I hear you talk to see the inspiration that has translated in just the people you live with. So Maya and the kids, and people don't just, it's really difficult. I mean, people do things with their life or become different creatures and adapt and modify themselves when they don't necessarily have a mentor. But when you have a mentor, and most people that I've listened to have had a mentor, and Maya and your kids have a mentor, and I hope it's you. Like, know.
Yeah, I can definitely, yes, and I'm reminded every day to be as gracious as I can with them as well, because it's not fair to push my high expectations on those that have not accepted those expectations. Those are mine. I accepted those for myself, but I have a tendency to push that agenda on others. It doesn't always work very well.
I know there's a balance there too, where you need to do by example. First of all, I believe do by example.
Totally.
People will just see that. You don't need to tell people what to do. They'll just see what to do as opposed to being told.
Exactly. Yeah. That is one thing that I'm definitely working towards. Just be busy doing the things that you say are important. Don't worry about whether others are following suit or not. And and there will come a time where it just kind of, it finally gets some traction. And inside the company that I'm working with right now, there's a lot going on. There's a big need for system and process and structure and accountability and guidance and ebb and flow and flexibility, all in the same breath. And so I have my skill sets are being pushed to the test and to its limits, to push beyond those limits that I know to be, because it could actually account for all of that and work really well. And I just not really experienced it before.
Well, the interesting thing, I feel very connected to everything you're saying, because I asked myself a question before we even met today. It was, who are you to me? Like, who do I know you to be? And one of the things I wrote down was fertilizer. Because
I won't take that as an insult.
No, and I don't mean, no, I know it depends how you feel about fertilizer and what it does, but
or how pure the fertilizer is. Let's
right. Okay. The purest form for sure. But the kind that just allows the roots to grow deep and wide. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I'll get that as a tattoo or something.
But it's the strength and the strategy that you have that it acts as the fertilizer because you're growing, and it's very natural because you're doing it for another person to connect with what you're seeing about them, and then using that, you're the catalyst. Like, that's what a fertilizer can be. And we don't have to look at the bad things about it, but it's going to help whatever is growing to grow, like actually grow, so that can be harvested.
Well, in fact, fertilizer is absolutely necessary, right?
Whether it's natural or chemical. Yeah.
Yeah. Without it, we would not be able to grow what we need to the degree in which we require it now for society, right? So yeah, I take that as a compliment. I'm just being
You're just throwing a wrench my way. I know you are.
That's right. I told you I would.
Oh, goodness. Well, so the only thing I wanted to kind of ask you, but you kind of touched on it, was more about, I mean, I don't think there's ever really a defining moment that changes the entire, life trajectory. It just kind of happens almost as if you're just landmarks along the way of, if you were to plan a road trip from here to Vancouver, you would plan your stops along the way. And so in life, I kind of feel like there's just little pit stops that happen where you fill up with gas, and, those moments become the catalysts that help you keep going forward. And when you reflect on, your life, there's probably been many catalysts or moments or aha moments of change that have happened for you. You talked about some of the people in your life. Were there any other experiences or circumstances that led you to kind of know who you were and what you needed to do to make sure you were nourishing your life to get you, to get to the end of that roller coaster ride that you say you don't want to get off?
Yeah. It would have been the moment I decided to perform poetry. I'm not a poet, or that would be the story. And I'm not a good writer, was another story. And yet, despite that, I did that anyways, and spent like 6 months writing a piece to perform that was 20 minutes long. It was about my life up until this point. And I'd never, ever done that before. That became the catalyst for everything that I do now that nurtures my soul, the writing mostly, and even performing. I haven't really performed anything recently. I don't know if I ever will again. I have no idea, but in that season of my life, it was something that I was compelled to do, and an opportunity presented itself to me to do that. And it made a substantial impact in my life with the people that I had met, and just my ability to, the freedom that I gave myself to just share my story my way. It was great. It was very cathartic.
Well, I will have to share that poem for people to watch
Yeah,
or listen to.
It's out there in the interwebs.
Yeah. Well, we'll share it in the notes with the show too. Well, I would say that this has been a really good conversation about pushing limits, using creativity to create yourself to be whoever it is you want to be. Thanks for listening to Wellbeing That Works. Before you go, take 1 minute to write down your takeaway from today's guest. And be sure to download our wellbeing evaluation sheet to help you along your wellbeing journey. And if you've got something to share to inspire others, be sure to be a guest on our show. Until next time, with love and kindness. I'm so glad. I am so glad that you're having this conversation with me first, because as I was coming up to it, I'm like, I better stand for this conversation because I am getting nervous. So I had to stand and.
Oh, so you're actually standing.
I am
That's not a metaphor for not backing down.
I am standing.
Good.
Because you have to use your body to talk back to that mind of yours sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm not nervous. I'm talking to David.
Yeah,
what a better person to be talking to.
I mean, I might make it uncomfortable for you unexpectedly.
Yeah, you probably will.
Just looking at my notes here, I think there was something I put in here.
You're going to throw a wrench, hey?
Make sure I throw a wrench.